All right, so are you ready to dive into some Pastor Jerry E's?
Let's do it.
All right, so this is some fascinating stuff. This is from one of his YouTube videos
Okay.
called 5 Days of God of Wonders, God of Perfections.
Mm-hmm.
And this is day 4 from November 28th, 2024.
Wow.
And this is a really interesting one because you sent this in because you were fascinated by the power of belief,
Right.
especially when it comes to healing and success.
Yeah, and you know what's really fascinating to me about Pastor Ease is that he's really crafted his message carefully, where it's not just about believing in God, it's believing in a God that actively intervenes in your life, like down to the detail. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he really emphasizes that point by using phrases like, what God cannot do does not exist.
Right.
You almost feel like you're daring the universe to prove him wrong.
Exactly. And that's really the point. It's like you're putting it out there and you're saying like there's no room for doubt here. This is it. Like this is the truth. And I think for people who are really going through it,
Yeah.
that can be very appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into some of the testimonies.
Okay.
This first one is about a 15-year-old girl who loses her vision,
Mm-hmm.
and she's diagnosed with optic neuritis.
Oh, wow.
And this is like every parent's worst nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. And the way the story unfolds is just it's very dramatic because the mother is like, searching online and she comes across this NSPPD prayer and then all of a sudden like overnight the daughter regains her sight and it's like,
Yeah.
when you've exhausted all other options, you're really looking for a miracle. So it really plays into that desire.
And it's not even just the healing, it's where the source is coming from.
Right.
Because traditional medicine couldn't fix it.
Right.
But the implication is that the faith could.
Yeah, and it really positions his ministry as something that's beyond conventional methods. Like, when you've tried everything else, this is what you do. You go to Pastor Izai.
Right.
And he has this power to achieve the impossible.
Exactly. All right. So then there's the second testimony.
Okay.
And this is about a woman who has been battling infertility for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
6 failed IVF attempts. I mean, you can only imagine
It's heartbreaking.
what that does to a person.
It is. And I think, again, Pastor Izai's message offers this like glimmer of hope
Yeah.
in a situation that just seems impossible.
Yeah.
And he really he doesn't shy away from how difficult that is, the years of disappointment. And that just makes the birth of her son even more impactful.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's almost like he's saying that modern medicine has its limits.
Right.
But faith can go beyond those limits.
Exactly.
And I think that's a very powerful message for somebody who's dealing with something as personal as infertility.
And the way he weaves these stories into his sermons,
Yeah.
it makes it feel like a community. Like everyone is sharing in these victories,
Yes.
even if they haven't experienced one themselves.
Right. It's building this collective hope
Yeah.
that anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're getting into the career miracles.
Okay.
And this one is about a woman who went from being a regular nurse to the director of nursing
Wow.
to general manager, all within a year.
That's incredible.
And she attributes all of it to Pastor Eze's birthday declaration.
And what I think is really fascinating about this is that it ties into this concept of self-belief,
Okay.
which is something that we know in psychology is so important for success.
Right.
It's not just about praying for a promotion.
Yeah.
It's about believing that you deserve it
Right.
and taking those steps to achieve it.
So it's like Pastor Eze's message is giving her that extra little push.
Yeah, that boost of confidence to really go after what she wants.
Yeah.
It's not just about the divine intervention. It's about that interplay between the faith and your own actions.
Right. And then there's this guy who's initially skeptical
Okay.
of Pastor Eze's ministry, but then he's on a flight and he sees this dying man get revived after somebody invokes the God of Pastor Jerry.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a turning point.
Yeah, and you know what I find really interesting about that story is just the setting of it all.
Yeah.
Like imagine you're on a plane, you're already kind of on edge,
Right.
and then this happens, and
Yeah.
it's like this shared experience,
Oh,
and it's
man.
so powerful because it's like, wow, this really is real.
Yeah. Especially for someone who's skeptical.
Yeah, and it reinforces, the whole belief system
Mm-hmm.
and really strengthens that community around his ministry.
So we're seeing these recurring themes, right, of faith, divine intervention, the power of community.
Yeah,
But there's also this undercurrent of urgency.
right.
Like, don't wait your miracles right around the corner.
Yeah, and that sense of urgency is so key because it creates this feeling of now or never, which I think is really motivating, especially for an audience that might feel disillusioned or like they're stuck.
All right, so let's unpack this idea of urgency a little more.
Okay.
He uses this metaphor of a major gate that needs to be opened.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that?
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Like there are these smaller doors that are opening and they represent, some progress, but then there's this major gate and that's like the breakthrough.
Right. It's like, okay, you've been faithful, you've seen the little things,
Mm-hmm.
but get ready for the big one.
Exactly. And it ties back into that sense of urgency we were talking about. Like
Yeah.
he's creating this anticipation. It's
Yeah.
like a cliffhanger.
Totally. And he goes on to describe what's on the other side of this gate.
Right.
Visibility repositioning.
Right.
Like a total transformation.
It's like this upgraded life.
Yes.
And I think for people who are going through challenges, it's very appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not without conditions.
Right.
Because he keeps saying you need to sow seeds and make offerings.
Mm-hmm.
So the implication is that financial contributions are key to unlocking all these blessings.
Yeah. And that's something that's really interesting to me because it brings up this whole idea of, faith and prosperity.
Yeah.
Like, is material wealth a sign of God's favor?
Right, right. And it makes you wonder what impact that has on people, especially those who might be struggling financially.
It's a tough one because on the one hand, you could say that it's empowering.
Huh.
It's like you have the power to change your circumstances.
Yeah.
And that includes, through your financial contributions.
Right, like you're investing in your future.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it could also create this sense of pressure.
Right.
Or even guilt.
Yeah.
Especially for those who might not be able to afford to make these large donations.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's a fine line, I think, between faith and exploitation.
So it's just a good reminder that no matter who's speaking,
Mm-hmm.
we need to be discerning.
Absolutely. Always question, evaluate, and make those decisions based on your own values.
Right. Okay. So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into this,
Yeah.
into these excerpts,
Mm-hmm.
what stands out to you as significant?
Well, I think the main thing is just how Pastor Ise is so good at blending faith psychology, even marketing.
He's a great communicator.
He is.
Yeah.
And he understands the power of storytelling,
Yeah.
using those testimonies, and it creates this emotional connection and a sense of community.
And it's a formula that's worked for a really long time,
For centuries.
especially in a world that feels so uncertain.
Right. People are looking for something to believe in.
Right.
And he's offering that.
Yeah. What do you think his ultimate goal is with this message?
I think it's empowerment.
Okay.
It's about inspiring people believing in themselves, believing in God, and taking action.
And doing it with a lot of enthusiasm.
Yes, and really embracing those miracles and that abundance.
So what about the people who might be skeptical?
I would say approach it with curiosity.
Okay.
It's a way to understand a certain worldview.
Right. Like appreciate the power of belief, even if it's not exactly the same as yours.
Exactly. There are many paths to finding meaning in life.
That's a good point.
And faith is a big part of that for a lot of people.
This has been fascinating.
It has.
So what's that one thought-provoking question you want to leave our listener with?
I think the question is, where do we draw the line between faith and personal responsibility?
Yeah.
Because, believe and it shall be given, but at the same time, you got to do something.
Right.
Like, you have to take those steps. And that's where it gets tricky.
Right.
Because what if your miracle doesn't come?
Yeah.
Is it because you didn't have enough faith, or was it something that you didn't do?
Yeah.
And it's this balance that I think everybody has to kind of figure out for themselves.
It makes me wonder about the people who might be struggling
Right.
and really desperate for that breakthrough.
Mm.
Like, could this make them feel worse?
That's a good point. And it's something that we really have to be careful about, especially when we're talking about sensitive things like health and finances and relationships.
Yeah.
It's one thing to encourage hope and belief, but it's a whole other thing to say that you're suffering because you don't have enough faith.
It's definitely a fine line.
It is.
And I think it also shows how important it is to think critically, even when it comes to faith.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you can still be a believer and question things and analyze things and make your own decisions.
Yeah, blind faith can be just as dangerous as, not believing in anything at all.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Yeah. So what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listener from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just realizing that belief is powerful,
Okay.
but it's not magic, you know what I mean? It's like this spark that can create change.
Yeah.
But you have to be the one to actually make it happen, to take those steps.
Yeah. And to do it with, like we were saying, a healthy dose of discernment.
Absolutely, because there are so many different ways of looking at things,
Right.
and it's about finding what works for you.
This has been such a great conversation,
It really has.
and we hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about
Definitely.
and maybe sparked your own curiosity about the power of belief.
I hope so.
Thanks for listening.